We are following breaking news out of Russia today, where a plane purportedly carrying Yevgeny Prigozhin, founder of the Wagner mercenary group, has crashed 2 months to the day after Prigozhin staged a short-lived mutiny against the Russian military. According to Russian officials, Prigozhin was one of the 10 passengers on the plane. Now, all are said to have died after the plane crashed while en route to St. Petersburg from Moscow. However, we still do not have official confirmation that Prigozhin himself is dead. Now, you can see here the plane suddenly plummeting to the ground, which has fueled speculations about whether the crash was an accident or not. According to the Washington Post, 2 loud sounds were heard just before the plane crashed. Now, after his failed coup, Putin exiled Prigozhin and his followers to nearby Belarus, and he has branded them as traitors. Today, President Biden did not rule out that Putin may be behind the crash.
I don't know for a fact what happened, but I'm not surprised.
Do you believe?
There's not much that happens when Russia and Putin's not behind, but I don't know enough to know the answer.
Joining me now is Susan Glasser, staff writer for The New Yorker and co-author of Kremlin Rising, Vladimir Putin's Russia and the End of Revolution. Susan, thank you for being here. I just wonder, as a Russia watcher and knower such as you are, do you have a theory about why we don't have official confirmation about whether Prigozhin is dead or alive?
Well, look, there's always a lag between the two things. I think the message is pretty loud and clear. Certainly, the default setting here has to be that Prigozhin is presumed dead at this moment in time. The Wagner Group social media channels are also suggesting that that's exactly what happened. You made the point, Alex, that it's exactly 2 months since the failed mutiny by Prigozhin and a cohort of his men. He didn't. Unwisely, it appears he did not choose to stick with the exile in Belarus that was negotiated to end that aborted mutiny. And I think, in our experience, Vladimir Putin, as Bill Burns said, I think just a few weeks ago, he likes his revenge served cold. It was unsustainable in many ways for this really overt act of challenge to the supremacy of the state in Russia. It was, I think, many people expected, frankly, something like this. And there's a long, long trajectory, over 20 years, of people who go into open opposition to Vladimir Putin. They end up dead. They end up poisoned. They end up in mysterious accidents. So, again, there's a long chain of predecessor events to something like this.
Do you see this as an escalation of Putin's sort of position as it concerns adversaries? I mean, he did say that Prigozhin was going to go on and live in exile. Do you think that Russians chalk this up to, oh, well, he violated effectively the terms of that exile, therefore he deserves it? Or does this in any way discredit Putin in the eyes of Russians?
I think this is Putin believes that the language to speak, the language of power, is the language of the strong beating the weak. He said that before very openly. In his view, it's only the weak that get beaten. And so this is not meant to be subtle. And it's not subtle. And Putin's rule over 20 years has not been subtle. The idea is not to follow some arbitrary set of rules, but to show that you make the rules. And one of the things that was so shocking to Russia watchers, Alex, was the idea that for once, Yevgeny Prigozhin was challenging the state's monopoly on the use of armed power in that abortive mutiny. And I think that was really just a shocking moment. So this is very important in many ways for Putin to reassert the supremacy of his rule. And, in my experience, the more over the top and unabashed the aggressive move by Putin, that's the kind of choice he's made it again and again to stay in power. He is the longest serving Russian leader since Joseph Stalin and is still relatively young at age 70 years old. This is a ruthless, cutthroat system. And I think a display of naked power is exactly what one would imagine Putin going for in a moment like this.
Well, it's also worth noting that another top Wagner official, Dmitry Utkin, was also on that plane and may also have perished. The Wagner Group has been responsible for, I guess you could call, some of Russia's most meaningful successes on the battlefield in Ukraine. So I wonder what you think the implications are for that war more broadly and more specifically the Wagner Group's existence.
I think that really is an important question, at least in the initial aftermath of the aborted mutiny. Ukrainians were obviously looking very closely at this. The Pentagon was looking very closely at this. There was no overt sign that it caused any kind of problem on the ground for Russians in the fighting the Ukrainians in the counteroffensive. So that's something to watch more. It's also interesting and certainly not a coincidence that it was also announced that General Sergei Surovikin was removed as the head of the Russian Air Force at the same time. He was also taken apparently into custody in the aftermath of the Wagner rebellion. And I think that you have to think that he was also basically pulled aside for being too close to those who challenged the power in Russia. So it's yet another earthquake, though, that results from Putin's catastrophic decision to invade Ukraine. I think that's an important way to look at what's happening here. None of this would have come into the open, these disputes inside the Kremlin, if it were not for this kind of catastrophic war that Russia is waging in Ukraine right now. Enormous casualties, questions about the Kremlin's leadership. All of that is a result of biting off more than they could handle in Ukraine.
Yeah, well, seismic developments on all fronts tonight. Susan Glasser, thank you as always, Susan. It's great to see you.
Thank you.